To all my fellow brothers and sisters, peace be with you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Ben, and I welcome you to the Restored Ephraim Publications channel. And today we're going to continue talking about the United Order, and this is video 5 of the Living the United Order series that I'm making. And today is going to be the last day we talk about Satan's system, because after today I think that we'll have all the basic knowledge that we need to talk about concerning Satan's kingdom, and then we can just look completely forward to the Lord's system. And today we're going to talk about how capitalism and communism are actually just two opposing ideas of the same thing. And so the whole of Satan's system, economic system, is mercantilism. Now, there's really no difference between, as far as mercantilism is concerned, between capitalism and communism. It's just different ways of practicing mercantilism. And we're going to cover the differences and the similarities. First off, what mercantilism is, the root of it, it's the act of buying and selling for the purpose of making profit. And along with that, what happens is that there's short buying and high selling, and the oppression of the poor and enslaving the consumer. And that's all because it is the system that Satan runs. Now, I want to make a distinction, because there's some people might get the wrong idea. There's the idea of making something and then selling it. That's not mercantilism. What we actually call that is artisanry. And artisanry is a good thing. And in the old days, people would make stuff and they would sell or trade it, and that's a pretty good system. But then what happens is that the merchants take over, because the merchants buy something from someplace and then they bring it over somewhere else and sell it over there, and that's how they make their money. And so that is what I mean by what I talk about mercantilism. And artisanry is something that's good and is even part of the United Order, because those skills are given to us by God, and we can use those skills. When the house of Israel apostatized from the Lord, the Lord decries the state that his people are in. He says in Hosea chapter 12 verse 7, "He is a merchant, the balances of deceit are in his hand, he loveth to oppress." And so it's the same throughout entire history. Israel has become a bunch of merchants when they apostatized from the Lord. And if that wasn't bad enough, it says that the balances of deceit are in their hands, meaning that they don't use an honest system of exchange. And he says he loveth to oppress. The word oppression in Hebrew, the root of the word is related to loaning money for usury. And that's also in fact the word deceive is the word for loaning money for usury. The term oppression is also related to it, and that oppression is financial bondage, and that's not the only thing that is oppression, but that is a big part of oppression as well. And so they love to loan out money for usury, which thing the Lord forbid in the Bible among His people. He said you can lend money for usury to someone outside your nation, but inside your nation you can't do that. Now, we've talked about before of a false dichotomy, which is when there's two opposing sides that are actually controlled by the same thing, and they're used for power play. That is exactly what capitalism and communism are. It's just two different forms of mercantilism. I like to explain it in the simplest terms. The simplest term is that capitalism is old rich people using money to seize all the wealth from everybody. Communism, on the other hand, is old rich people using the power of government to seize the wealth from everybody. And that's really the root of it. Under communism, the government is the one that forces wealth to be taken from people. But under capitalism, they use deception and money in order to rob the wealth from the people. In fact, I even refer to communism as hyper-capitalism, because when you understand who pushes communism, it's actually the merchants that are pushing communism and funding it, because they understand that under that system they'll be the ones to run everything. Ultimately, I believe that capitalism is specifically designed to fail, because as the people turn to wickedness, it becomes more and more and more corrupt. And as it becomes more corrupt, the merchants become more and more greedy, and then the poor are so oppressed and broken that they demand justice, and then that's when they offer the false solution of communism to enforce their own version of justice. But in the process of that, the middle class are the ones wiped out for their wickedness, but the ultra elite, which are actually the ones causing the main problems, are the ones that end up being in charge. And so then everybody's poor except for this rich, wealthy elite. And that's exactly what happened in countries that got taken over by the idea of communism, is that the middle class were completely destroyed because they run all the low level businesses. They have a lot of the money, and so they were arrested and tortured and had all their property and wealth stolen from them. But none of that happened to the rich ultra elites, the merchants, and they were the ones that in the end were behind the so-called government that was established for communism. But you see, this is how the Lord works. The Lord uses the wicked to destroy the wicked. So because the middle classes were using their position to oppress and not paying their fair wages and making sure that their servants had sufficient needs met, then the servants rose up and took the property of their masters, being supported by the ultra rich behind the poor masses. And that is unfortunately a just judgment, because what the middle class is doing is wicked, but what the poor are also doing are wicked, and so they get even more oppressed by a greater power. Even under that oppression, some people even saw that as better than the life that they had, because it certainly wasn't. It was certainly hard, but in some cases, it did end up being better for some people, because of the greed of people and the selfishness. And so now let's talk about the good and bad of capitalism. These ideas are although they're instigated by Satan, it's all different things. And so there's good things in capitalism, and there's good things in communism, and there's bad things in capitalism and bad things in communism. And we're going to talk about that right now. Personally, in my opinion, capitalism is better than communism until the merchants start taking over. Then it all falls apart, and then turns it into communism. And a reminder, if you are new to this video series, I am neither a communist or a capitalist. I believe in the United Order system, which is the system that the Lord has established for those who want to follow Him to live, and that's the Lord's economic system. So the very first and most important thing that capitalism does do is that it has a right to free agency. And capitalism allows us to use our free agency. Free agency is a gift from God, and we can make whatever choices we want under that. And even to the point where we can choose to work wickedness, and we can even include the Lord in our system, or we can reject the Lord altogether out of our system. That's what the communists do, and I would not recommend that, because when you remove God out of the system, then all you're left with is the devil, and that's certainly not going to go well. A second good thing about capitalism is that we have a right to own property. And this is another very important idea, because the Lord considers property to be important, and He has established a whole bunch of rules regulating property, and the restoration of property, and preventing thieving, and property is an important system to the Lord, and it's also like with in the United Order, that's also based on free agency, because you have to choose it. And under the United Order, you also have your own property. You do consider all things owned by the Lord. When we use the term property in the United Order, we're referring to responsibility. And so if the Lord gives you responsibility for something, then no one is allowed to take that away from you without your permission, and such and such. because we can't own property under capitalism, we can sell property, buy property, and do whatever we want as long as we have the capital to do so. A third thing that is good about capitalism is that the system tends to be more concerned with the liberty, and government has low to no intervention in the lives of the people. And again, this is important because we can better exercise our free agency by not being compelled by government mandates made by stupid bureaucrats. Fourth good thing about capitalism is that workers and employers are free to hire or to be hired at will. Employees can prosper by their own efforts, while employers can rid themselves of unprofitable employees. Everyone has the right, if they so desire, and have the means to start their own business. And so again, it's all about free agency, which is a good thing. A fifth good thing about capitalism is that it does not require centralization. Of course, what happens though is that when the merchants get too big, then everything tends to get centralized, and then it turns into communism. But in the early stages of capitalism, and there's lots of small companies and lots of opportunities, and more people can start things locally, and everything is more accessible locally, and that's all a good thing. And so those are the good ideas that capitalism follows. Now let's talk about the bad things that capitalism brings. And the first bad thing is that it creates a class system. A class system is abominable to the Lord. People are divided into different levels of wealth, and it's hard to advance oneself as merchants grow bigger and bigger if you are in the lower classes. Eventually the merchants, when they start taking over everything, they start pushing out the smaller companies or absorbing them, and it gets harder and harder and harder to reach into that market. A second bad thing about capitalism is that there is no concern for the poor. As the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and the rich grind the faces of the poor and oppress them. And the Lord is very concerned about the poor and wishes the poor to be elevated. And so under capitalism, unless you have righteous people, it turns into such a horrible system where the poor are just oppressed over and over and over again, and it's an abomination before the Lord. And the Lord loves the poor, and He wants them to have everything that they need. Now, of course, on the other hand, sometimes the poor can get greedy, which is that, and then that's where trouble comes in, and they start turning towards communism. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Third thing that is bad about capitalism is that it requires slavery to operate and make money. If you remembered from the video a few times ago, I don't remember the exact number it was, but we talked about that. What slavery really is. Slavery, for those who need a refresher, is that your labor and energy is used in exchange for the things that you need. Under what freedom really is that you take care of your own needs, you produce things yourself. And so under capitalism, you have to have people who own all the resources, and then they need to hire people, or if in some places they can force people into slavery. we use the term employee and employer now. In the old days, that would be master and slave or servant. Fortunately, capitalism tends to be hired servants, but it's still a form of slavery because the people are not taking care of themselves and require the resources of their masters or employers. But the thing is that the Lord does not want us to have slaves. He doesn't want us to be masters over slaves, but he wants us to become one in Christ. And so that means that we can't have masters and slavery, because in the United Order, we all have to be one. So that means we're all the master and we're all the laborer. And so so we're not one above another. And in order to make money under capitalism, employers will try to pay their employees as low as the market will allow, while at the same time getting the highest amount of work possible from them. And in this result we talked about from previous videos is what we call grinding the face of the poor. A fourth thing that is bad about capitalism is that the poor, the slaves, the laborers, do not have control over the use of their own production. Their work goes to mostly raise up their masters or employers while they remain in their poorer state. The Lord wants us to become one in that we are both the laborer and the owner together. And so, under capitalism, the poor don't really get a say in how the things that they produce get used. They don't go for their own benefit, except for to pay the meager wage that is allowed under the current market. And so that pretty much sums up my thoughts on capitalism. In short, I sum up capitalism in this one phrase: capitalism is the system for the selfish. Under capitalism is all about what can I do to raise myself, and how can I use everyone else to lift myself up. So now let's talk about the good and bad things that are in communism. Some people like to say that the United Order is a type of communism, but the truth is that communism is actually the satanic imitation of the United Order. And so it does have some similarities on the important parts, but on other stuff it is the exact opposite and is in opposition to communism. And we could say that the similarities between the United Order and communism are only skin deep. So they might look like similar systems, but they're not really. The first good thing about communism is that it claims to be concerned about the poor, but again, that appears to be more of a front, because in the end they make everybody poor. But it at least espouses the idea that the poor need to be taken care of, and this is something that the Lord has concern for too. As I said before, the Lord is concerned about the poor and wishes them to have the things that they need. A second good thing about communism is that it seeks to equalize the people and prevent economic inequalities. And again, this is something the Lord has said. He does not want us to be divided into classes and to have masters and slaves. And he wants to get rid of economic inequalities. And so again, that's a good idea, but the problem is that that's just talk in communism. They don't actually do that. What actually happens in communism is that everyone is made poor, and then there's a small rich elite that have everything that they need while everyone else suffers. A third good thing about communism is that it seeks to end the class system. And again, this is something that the Lord wants too. He does not want us to have a class system. He doesn't want there to be poor, middle, rich, ultra-rich. He wants us to become one. But again, as I said before, communism creates a major two-class system, poor, and then the rich elite who are in bed with each other. A fourth good thing about communism is that it seeks to have a community of property. Lord also wants us to have all things in common. And so under communism, everything is property of the state and is held in union. At least that's the theory. But it tends to not work out that well. The poor are still kept from ownership of the produce of their own labor. But the Lord, under His system, United Order, He wants us to truly have all things in common. And we do that by first understanding that everything that we have belongs to the Lord, and that the Lord gives us stewardship over things. And so that's the good things about communism, or at least what they say that's good, even though in practice it tends to not turn out that way. But the first thing that's bad about communism out front is that it removes the right of free agency. And free agency is something that's given to us as a gift from God, and anything that seeks to take away our free agency is in opposition to God. And the problem that people have is that they think that they can force people to do good, but forcing people to do good never changes the nature of humanity. Only the gospel of Jesus Christ has the power to change our sinful nature. And we need free agency to be able to do that. A second thing that is bad about communism is that it rejects God and religion as a control system to keep the poor and the lower classes under control. Though the wicked do use religion as a means for control, this does not mean that God does not have his own real system in place. And this is a really bad thing about communism, is that it removes God out of the picture as just a myth. And of course it does, because Satan runs it. But if we're going to have a righteous society, a good society, we need to have God in the picture. A third thing that is bad about communism is that all things are centralized in a big, powerful government, and businesses are controlled by the state, and all aspects of life are regulated by the state. The state is so big and powerful that in the end, no matter how well-meaning people are, the people are not able to control it, and they are oppressed and brought into poverty, as the individual does not matter compared to the state. And so that's not the Lord's system. The Lord's system is about individual self-control, while the state thinks they can lord themselves over everybody as if they were God and force everybody to do everything. And doing this, the people don't get choices. You get one type of cereal, one type of soap, one type of cheese, all types like that. You don't get choices. A fourth bad thing about communism is that it does not focus on each individual person's needs, but rather establishes a one-size-fits-all method of distribution. The Lord wants all people to have what they need and want within reason based upon their circumstances. And so the Lord wants us to have what we need and the things that we want, but we need to remember to keep our wants in reality, and understand that we have to balance things and keep it in perspective. Like, I could want something, but if I don't really need it and it's too much of a burden to get and to keep, then this is not good. And the Lord, he does want us to have the things that we need and the things that we want, according to again, within reason. A fifth bad thing about communism is that the product that is produced by the laborers is controlled and distributed by the government and not the laborers that produce it. And both communism and capitalism have this problem. And again, it's because it's the same idea, but two different sides of it. And so the laborers don't control what they produce. Under capitalism, it gets sold off by their masters. Under communism, the people, the government comes in and takes what you produce and gives to the people based on what their perceived need is. A sixth bad thing about communism is that because there is a set distribution of wealth, people are not motivated to improve or to innovate. People become lazy and things are not done well because there is no reason to do so. Those who have means to wealth are devoured by those who have not, and in the end there is economic problems and collapse into poverty for everybody. And again, as I mentioned earlier, communism tends to get pushed by the merchants who are the ultra rich merchants, knowing that it'll put all things under them as they are in bed with the government. And they use this idea of that they'll be able to take, they tell the poor that they'll be able to take things from the rich, and this is all rooted in greed. And in short, I can sum up communism with one phrase, that is, communism is the system of the greedy. So capitalism is the system for the selfish, while communism is the system of the greedy. Under capitalism, people seek to lift themselves up. Under communism, people want to tear down. And both those systems are not right before God. The Lord's system of the United Order is about free agency, and everybody owns everything together, and we become one. And everyone is lifted up and becomes equal, and there's no servants or masters or rich or poor. Everybody are lifted up under the Lord and become one with Christ. And so now we're done talking about the devil system. Only took 4 videos. And so now, from now on, we're going to talk about the Lord's system. And next time, we will begin talking about the history of the United Order. And I believe talking about history is important, because it gives us a perspective. And we can see where mistakes were made and do better next time. So I leave this with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.